Welcome to Christian Thought in Our World. This is episode 2, second round of discussion. We're thankful to the Lord that we have this opportunity to be able to get a good discussion going today. Our topic today is PC Hollywood cancel culture and the PragerU Kevin Sorbo interview. So we're going to be looking at what is going on in today's world regarding Hollywood and how cancel culture is actually affecting that. And of course, all of us, in one way or another, are affected by popular culture, particularly because we ourselves are, fans of watching films and TV shows and such things that the world has to offer to us. And some of those shows are actually pretty good. They're pretty good shows. But as we're gaining into a new era, we're seeing that the influences that are coming in are much stronger in terms of wokeness and a lot of immorality being promoted now in our shows and in their movies. So we want to be able to have a good discussion on this. If you'd like, you can go ahead and check out the PragerU Kevin Sorbo video, as there will be a link under the video in the description, and that way you'll have a good context for what this discussion is about. Beginning with the first point that I'd like to point out, which is that the world changes at every decade. While playing a traditional strong male character, Sorbo experienced world praise. But in today's culture, he would be seen as a white chauvinistic male. In a cultural misappropriation, as Hercules is a Greek figure. But as it is stated in Colossians chapter 2, 20 to 23, the world has its own regulations and precepts, so we should not fall into them. So this is one of the things that we definitely want to pay attention to, which is that as we are Christians, we know that we follow our precepts from the Bible, but the world has its own way of looking at things. And as I stated earlier, in every decade it changes. So it's interesting to see at this time the challenges that we are facing. Brother James, how do you see our current situation in light of the culture changing?
Well, it's an alarming thing that is going on because we've delved into a point where, in a sense, they are being fascist about the way that they want to promote their ideology and their worldview. So I wanted to quote from Ben Stein that he had once stated that the world does not want a religious, so we can put in Christian, either Jewish, Muslim, any type of religion institution or church as the governing church to the state, right? But are widely accepting the Darwinian church as the governing church. And as you see, that is survival of the fittest, and it is an anti-Christian ideology. Now, we have seen drastic changes in our people's worldview, as is evident from this video that we're watching, which is also in Hollywood. Yet their tolerance is really no tolerance at all. And by their human teachings and precepts, they are indulging in their flesh to a false wisdom. And this false wisdom is the postmodern worldview, as we saw in our previous video and podcast. But as the scriptures have stated multiple times, and as Paul also states, the invisible truth that the elemental spirits of the world, the false wisdom that has enveloped so many, is the opposite of what the Lord's word declares. This is what has become mainstream, and we must be counterculture. What was once spoken of behind the scenes has now broken through to all facets of our culture. And it all starts with the opposition and the eventual collapse of freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, as we see in the PC cancel culture. They have taken over the media, and they will cancel you at the drop of a hat. So in this, Kevin Sorbo has gone against the culture and against his own people in terms of Hollywood and the Actors Guild and anything that is involved in there. So we must be vigilant to these injustices and call them out like he has done. So I commend him on the things that he spoke about. And it is a very alarming thing, once again, that we are seeing in this culture, and hopefully that we can get past this, and it is not something that delves us into anarchy, chaos, and all the likes.
How about you, brother Johnny? What is your take on that, on the situation going on right now with Hollywood and the culture?
Well, I remember there was a book written by forget the name of that Jewish commentator, Michael Badvid. He had written a book about Hollywood, and he was basically saying that when you look at the country of the United States, but just Western culture in general, Hollywood is always further to the left in the country, and Hollywood is always because, um, as Dinesh D'Souza talks about, is that we have a ricochet of a liberal narrative. You have these ideas of inequality, or let me rephrase, what they want is equality of outcomes, and they want the redistribution of power, p- political power, and economics. And so, since you have these kinds of, and then of course it gets into the issue of morality and ethics. Do you have to have a husband and a wife in a home? Is it supposed to be one man, one woman? Is that the institution that is most fundamental to civilization, or does that even matter? And in today's modern culture, they're trying to reinvent the wheel, shall we say? And they are basically trying to promote that as a narrative. And it is taught in Hollywood, it's taught in the schools, it's taught in the media. And so, since it just keeps ricocheting and people are just hearing this same type of narrative over and over again, people just assume that that must be the correct way of seeing things. And when you happen to be someone who is an actor, Kevin Sorbo was raised as a conservative Lutheran, and he decided that he loved the arts, he wanted to get into acting. And when he started getting into that, he eventually started seeing that, if people would come up to him and say, "Are you a conservative?" And he'd be like, "It's like, what, are we having a drug deal over here that we have to be in private because I want you to know if I'm a conservative?" And so it's, you have to almost be ashamed of having conservative values in Hollywood. And the thing about Hollywood is that Hollywood in yesteryear was promoting conservative points of view. And at some point, when liberals started or the people on the left started to try to promote their ideas, they were fighting for the right to do so. They wanted equal rights. But once they took over and became the majority in Hollywood, they started basically ostracizing conservatives. And the whole idea of being creative is about creating a product which it can promote any narrative that you want in terms of, whether it's traditional or maybe more modern values. The idea is that you should have the freedom to promote them without being censored. So those are my thoughts.
No, and I think those are definitely things to consider. So one of the things that we do know about Hollywood is that there's always been a presence of leftism in there, particularly in the early days. Those who were pro-communist were very much wanting to be part of Hollywood, and the reason why is because communists, along with other groups, other movements such as National Socialist movement, the Nazi movement, was that they were very much interested in propaganda. And they knew that film was actually a very strong method in which one could deliver their message. And so Hollywood's always had that kind of a presence. That's why during the McCarthy era, when he was going after the communists that were supposed to be, in the country, and Hollywood was definitely pursued. A lot of actors were pursued in that arena, was because of the fact that it was always present there. And throughout the decades recently, I think as I think a lot of us remember, a lot of the stuff from the 80s, even back in those days, you started to see some of these themes. But it seems that along with those themes that were there were still, conservative voices. I mean, I remember, like, in the 1960s, you could take a movie like The Greatest Story Ever Told, and it was actually seen by millions of people. It was considered mainstream culture. But now, if you're a Christian, you're actually being looked at, as Kevin Sorbo pointed out, as an outsider. And so now you have to, in essence, be on the defense because you don't know what people are going to come after what you think or what you're saying. And I think that it's actually good that he's speaking out about these things because people need to have an understanding of the situation that's going on. Do you guys have any comments regarding Sorbo's testimony regarding these things? James, would you have any comment on that?
Well, I took an issue to something that he said. It was kind of towards the end of the video in the 8-minute mark, and that's where he states that we need to find a way to get some kind of common ground between conservatives and liberals. And I mean, the common ground is defined by the Cambridge Dictionary as shared interests, beliefs, or opinions between two people or groups of people. So here lies one of the problems of the new conservative Republican movement as they continually shift left in moral and ethical issues. We are finding an apostasy to the core Christian values that are defined in Scripture and have been proclaimed through church tradition. So how long will we continue to bark but have no bite? Leftists have their own Great Commission, which is at odds with our Lord. And so to me, compromise is sin. And the question is, who do we answer to? These affronts to our patient Lord will one day come to an end. So we are not to compromise. Common ground is a means to our defeat. And that's the issue that I see, that he might not even promote it in the sense of that's what he actually feels. But that's the take that I think many people are going to hear when they see him talk about the common ground. And so our political leaders need to call it as it is. Stop minimizing abominations to sell yourself for another political term. It's time to say abortion is murder and all parties involved are murderers. Let's rise up and shout, transgenderism is abhorring the laws of God. And allowing children to transition, it's pure evil. It really is. So we need, this is of course, in a certain sense, I think we need to become militant in our defense of our sweet Lord, who humbled himself to the point of death just to justify us in the sight of God. But our militant stance, it must be biblical. That is to say that we need to proclaim the true biblical love that proclaims the love of Christ to all humankind and is guided by our Lord's nonviolent model that he did while he was here on earth, physically and incarnate state. I would say that they must repent or face God's wrath. But until that time, we need to have our arms wide open to educate, instruct, nurture, and rebuke through and with the only moral standard that transcends all things. So when you see, again, when he's speaking about common ground, whether he does not necessarily want to go that route in the sense of compromising on his views, this is the people that we're going against. These are the people, they are imposing their worldview on us, and we need to stand against it. And that's why I took an issue with what Kevin Sorbo said at the end of the video.
So from your standpoint, you feel that he's not being forceful enough in the way he characterized it. Okay, yes. So so Brother Johnny, I am going to have you comment on that, but before you do, I'd like to make the second point that we want to deal with in this particular video, because it will tie into what Brother James talked about, and that is that while originally tolerance had a good origin in our culture, as this is a key feature in the American experiment, its aim to bring peace between different peoples in our country. But Jesus stated, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." That is, of course, off of Matthew 5:9. But these days, tolerance has actually brought discord among the peoples as minority views are being enforced among the peoples, bringing conflict among the majority population. Now, what I want to ask you about, Brother Johnny, is that in light of the fact that, the Bible does say that we should be peacemakers, do you think that what Kevin Sorbo is doing is good, or do you think that there's a compromise, as Brother James has stated?
Yeah, no, I honestly, I believe that Brother James, with all due respect, I believe he's misunderstanding Kevin Sorbo. I think that if Kevin Sorbo were on this broadcast today, although we're very small potatoes for him, but I mean, I think that if Brother Kevin Sorbo were here, being a conservative Christian who is putting faith-promoting movies like God's Not Dead, Let There Be Light, who's been doing interviews speaking out against the PC culture. He's taking all kinds of hate. I follow his Twitter. So he is constantly being criticized because he is so active. I think in many ways he's far more active in fighting the PC culture and the censoring. His Facebook page got censored, got taken down by Facebook. I think he's far more vocal and far more critical of what's being done in this cancel culture more than any of the three of us have. So I believe that if he was on this broadcast right now, he would be agreeing with everything that Brother James is saying, except for the criticism that he's maybe being a little too soft. But I think that when it comes to Brother Sorbo, when he speaks of common ground, because we can all pick up a dictionary and say, well, the dictionary defines the word in this way, but we also have to look at how a term is used in the vernacular. And within the context of that interview, he's talking about Hollywood. And so Hollywood is actually, we're talking about a Hollywood where if you're trying to put forth a faith-promoting movie, you have to go through so many obstacles. If Matt Damon and Ben Affleck want to put out a movie where they're promoting Noam Chomsky and Howard Zins, there's no real obstacle for them politically. But if you have a movie that's trying to promote a conservatively, let's say a movie that wants to promote Rush Limbaugh, the late Rush Limbaugh, or some other conservative icon like Ronald Reagan, there's a lot of flack for that kind of thing. And so what he wants is to be able to meet at the table and be able to have a healthy disagreement. If someone says, Brother James, you're anti-science. Well, what Kevin is saying, well, okay, wait, let's discuss the science, if you're talking about things like global warming or abortion, or if you're talking about evolution or something like that, like, okay, where are we going with this? What are you saying about the science? Like, one of the things that he talks about is that liberals will tell him that he's anti-education. How did we get to him being anti-education? This guy went to college. His wife, Sam Sorbo, educates their children at home. So he's very, very much a conservative. And all that they're saying is that we're not trying to force everyone to be a Christian. We want to witness, make disciples of all the nations, but we don't want to force anyone to be a Christian. But we don't want the secularists to try to tell us how we are to believe and tell us that we are anti-science when Christianity historically is what pushed forward the progress of science. So I believe that that's what he's talking about. And I've listened to enough of his videos, I've read enough of his tweets, I've seen his movies to know. I mean, when you look at God's Not Dead, has a whole narrative. He plays an atheist in the movie, but the student that he's debating in the movie is using arguments that you would find in a lot of Christian apologetics textbooks. And the whole conclusion of the movie is that we can't just allow the education system to make the declaration that God is dead, and we just have to assume that atheism is true. So in God's Not Dead, he basically has the student, the writers have the student basically show up the professor, namely Kevin Sorbo's character, and all of the students are agreeing God's not dead, and that basically this debate is still alive and well. And so in terms of Hollywood, we should be able to have the debate. We should be able to sit at the table and have a discussion, and where we can agree, we can make some progress, but we don't have to compromise on the basic principles, which are family, church, and of course national security.
So from your standpoint, you actually think that when he's speaking of finding a common ground, that he's actually that it's actually a good thing. I can see a little bit of an argument there in terms of that. If we look at Acts 17, when Paul is in Mars Hill, he makes an appeal, to those that were in Athens, quoting their philosopher, and so I think that there is sometimes a common ground that one can find with someone who's on the opposition. The only thing that I personally do see as a difference is that I think that a lot of the people today are operating much more as leftists than liberals. So in the 1960s, we had a thriving liberal movement, and people who were liberal were people who believed in free speech. They supported the civil rights movement, which was about not looking at people through the color of their skin. Another thing that they considered was because of feminism, not taking into account gender. But yet today we're living in a day where it's actually the opposite of that, where people are actually wanting people to be considered not on the basis of their character, but actually on the color of their skin, their gender, and these are things that were antithetical, right, before. And so the thing that I find difficult is that a lot of people today, and there's been, there's a little bit of discussion about, the whole term of liberal and or even to say communist and socialist. And I think that there's a difference, because people who were liberal, which was pretty much the Democratic Party in about 40 to 20 years ago, they actually believed in those same things, and so we had that common ground. But it seems like today we're having a lot of these things challenged, and things that are actually anti-constitutional. As a matter of fact, these people think that we should get rid of the Constitution. They don't see the Constitution as being a good document, which of course for those of us who live in this country and who honor this country, right, and we believe in its principles, particularly as Christians, that's of great concern, because this is a country that was founded by people who were believers, and godly principles were instilled into our system. So for people to come and say, well, we don't agree with it, then it is showing, in essence, what Brother James was talking about, which is that they really have another foundation. So for me, what I would say is that if someone has a much more liberal, view, then I think that could be more worked with, because we have a common ground. But when you have someone that's a leftist, you're talking about someone that is totalitarian, and the only time that they actually speak of freedom of speech is when they're not in power. But now that they're coming into power, I'm seeing that they're actually looking to silence us and silence anyone actually who does not agree and toe the line with them. And so to me, that's where I would have a concern. I do want to also show another concern that I have, which is that in one of the videos actually that Brother Johnny sent to me, which I thought was good, and I actually had viewed it previously, and it was a Kevin Sorbo video where he talks about the taking down of his Facebook page. And I thought that it was interesting that he actually was working with them so that they wouldn't boot him out, and yet it didn't matter. They still ended up booting him out. So it shows to me that I don't know how much of an effectiveness we're going to have trying to communicate with these people. And I think that's why it's important for us to think about, how do we react in light of this? If we're going to be canceled and we're not going to be heard, how should we react to these things? What do you think, Brother Johnny? Let me start with Brother Johnny. What would be your take on that?
Well, I did want to make one more comment about Kevin Sorbo and the use of the term liberal, because liberalism, that when you speak of what liberalism is, it depends on what period of time you're talking about. So there's books on the subject of liberalism that have been written by Ludwig von Mises, and liberalism originally meant leave me alone to just live my life according to the dictates of my own faith or belief system, and don't interfere with my life. That's basically what liberalism historically meant. Now those who are on the left, and that was basically the right-wing view, but those who are on the left have actually co-opted that term, and so whenever we speak in modern times and say the word liberal, we are talking about people that are on the left. So when you're talking about someone like a John F. Kennedy, and Kevin Sorbo made this observation in his videos, that if you were to talk to a liberal today and give them a quotation from John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, but without telling them that it's John F. Kennedy, and you ask them, is this a Republican or a Democrat? And they'll say, a lot of them will think that this is actually a Republican talking, because the liberalism of John F. Kennedy's time doesn't fit today's mold. And so what we have, it's a bit of a semantic issue, because of the issue that you have the word liberal meaning one thing 60 years ago, and then it evolving into what it means today, or how it is used in the common vernacular today. And I wouldn't die on the hill of trying to say, well, you're not the real liberal, I'm the real liberal. I'm fine with that. And in terms of fighting this, I think that it has to be fought in the basically the three areas that the people on the left, what I would call liberals, have actually taken control, which is number one, education, number two is the media, and number three, it is the entertainment industry, because these are the three areas that are basically influencing the youth of this generation. So what we're seeing in the schools, what we're seeing in the media, what we're seeing in the entertainment industry is influencing this generation of kids that are teenagers today, and those are the voters of tomorrow. And then of course we as Christians, we have to make disciples not just of the nations, but of ourselves, because we have many people who have Bibles and they're going to church on Sunday, but they're pulling the lever for people that want to kill babies, in abortion. So we have to clean our own house in terms of just discipling the church, because we need to have a Christian worldview, which is, of course, the name of our channel is Christian Thought in Our World. And so many professing Christians don't have a biblical or Christian thought that they apply to the other aspects of our lives.
What is your reaction, Brother James, to Brother Johnny's statements?
Well, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with his comments. The problem that I see is the progressive way that things are happening. Liberalism is a step in the foundation of where we are today. Just like the Enlightenment, just like Darwinian thought, atheism, secularism, humanism, all these things are laying this almost like a step pyramid to what we are today. Now, we can get worse. We can get much worse. And I think the majority of Christians today, because they have a futuristic look of the world in terms of how eschatology, the last days are happening in how they're expressed in the scriptures, they believe that it's going to get worse. So my question is, once again, are we going to just continue to bark, say, hey, look, you guys are wrong, you guys, what you're doing is this and that, or are we actually going to fight? And I don't necessarily mean fight violently. I'm not promoting any ways of going out there and doing what the Black Lives Matter and Antifa do. What I'm saying is, are we going to fight by going out there, witnessing, bringing the gospel to give them what the truth is, where it comes from, why we believe these things? That's the thing that I have a problem. Why I had the problem with what he said, because anytime somebody wants to come to common ground, we're compromising something. It may not be something that is necessarily ideological, but we're compromising something. We've been doing this for the last 200 years, and this is where we are. We need to change that. We need to go on the offensive. And I would think also that if the classic liberalism was, well, leave us alone, we want to do our thing, it is kind of embodied right now in the libertarian political ideology, which, to be honest, I kind of am closer with, because I find the Republican Party is leaving me. Just like many Democrats have said that the Democratic Party has left them, the Republican Party has left me for a long time. You're seeing it. The people that are on board are compromising way too much. And it's compromising to the point where it's making Christianity a secondhand issue. And when I mean Christianity, I mean the moral aspect, the religious aspect, and the way you live your life, the law, the moral law, the ethical law. And I'm done with that.
At this moment in time, I want to let you guys know who have any questions to go ahead and send them in. If it's something that you don't have, that you don't need answered today, or you come up with, feel free to go ahead and email the questions. And we should have an email link on the video page.
Although they can also ask on Facebook or YouTube.
Okay, so you can use your social media location or site to be able to do that. I'd like to go ahead then and go into the third point, which is that as the enemies of God work against you, to be not fearful, right? But be faithful and certain in those things that have been proven to be true and good, and to stand with what is good and know that you will prevail in God. And this is an encouragement actually given in Isaiah chapter 41, verses 10 to 12, which I would like to read to you here, which says, "Fear not, I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Behold, all who are incensed against you shall be put to shame and confounded. Those who strive against you shall be as nothing and shall perish. You shall seek those who contend with you, but you shall not find them. Those who war against you shall be as nothing at all." So this is a wonderful, wonderful encouragement that we have in Isaiah that was given to Israel. But we know that same promise is given to us who are in Christ. And I think it's an important thing that we make our voices be heard. And I think the one thing that I do have a concern with is, while I understand, Brother James, that we want to stand our ground where we're at, but I think as Brother Johnny pointed out, though, and Kevin Sorbo's pointing out, we have to have an effect on the culture. And so what I'm concerned with is how do we make that transition? Because, in other words, most of us, I would say, go to the movies, watch TV shows, or even more concerning, our children do it, and if our children are doing it, we know that they're definitely getting a message being given by, by the TV shows and film. And so the question is, how can we change the culture so that Hollywood again could begin to consider the things that we believe, and in essence pull back on the things that they are trying to promote? Brother James, if you'd like to share your thoughts on that.
We do have a question, by the way, but go ahead, James.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the question. So we definitely, to make an impact on the culture, we cannot let ourselves be canceled. So to not let ourselves be canceled, we need to be militant. So one of the issues, or another issue that I had with Kevin Sorbo in his video, is around the 4-minute mark, where he states that today you have to play more the game by biting your lip more than ever because of the climate of the cancel culture. Mm-hmm. And as you pointed out in Isaiah 41, 10 through 12, that we are not to fear the opposition because the Lord is with us. So we shall not be dismayed because Yahweh is our God. He will strengthen us, help us, and uphold us with his righteous hand. He, God, will put them to shame and confound their thoughts. They are nothing when they stand up to God, and they will perish by the brightness of his glory. When we uphold the Lord's commands, and this is the way that we need to move forward, when we uphold the Lord's commands, we shall not find those who oppose him and wage war on us, because he is the destroyer of iniquity and the redeemer of his people. The only way we can move is through God, through Christ. We need to hit them hard. We need to go at them And with the Holy Spirit speaking through us, we need to confound them. We need to show them that their truth is not truth. They are speaking falsehoods. They are speaking against our Christ, our Lord. And they will suffer the consequences, maybe not here on earth, but they will suffer the consequences. And we need to, and I say this with a grain of salt, we need to allow, but in reality is the Holy Spirit, no matter if we are in agreement or not, will be the one that works in their hearts. So the culture will be changed by the Holy Spirit.
Brother Johnny, any reaction?
Yes. I actually do acknowledge that the concern that Brother James has, and we have about 3 questions by Brother Patrick Chan. But I wanted to quote from this verse right here, because when we're talking about Bible verses that say we don't have to fear, even Jesus says, do not fear him who can destroy the body but not the soul, but fear him who can destroy both body and soul in Gehenna. Obviously, this is in the ultimate sense that we have to live our lives in terms of putting our faith in God, knowing that our lives and our destiny are in his hands. However, the Bible also says, and this is in Matthew 10:16, behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. And Jesus goes on. So the point is that as Christians, we do have to have prudence. We need to know when to speak, but it's not just what to say, it's how to say it and when to say it at the appropriate time. And when you're talking about institutions, and in this case, you're talking about the institution of the movie industry, which is where Brother Kevin Sorbo works. We're dealing with an industry where, if you're Clint Eastwood, or if you're someone like, I forget the name of the other gentleman who's the father of Angelina Jolie, he's a conservative in Hollywood, but these men have been in Hollywood. John Voight, that's right. Or if you're someone like a Mel Gibson, although he did fall out of graces for some things that he had said in the past, but he's kind of trying to bounce back. But I mean, these are people that have been known to be conservatives for many, many years. And even Sylvester Stallone is sort of right of center. And so when you're looking at these kind of people, they can get away because they're already legends. If you're in a Clint Eastwood movie, you're going to be in a movie that it might possibly get nominated for an Academy Award. But if you're Eric Ramirez or James Aleman or Johnny Navarro, and you decide, okay, I'm a conservative, these are my political views, I want to audition for the role of, the Joker in the next Batman movie. There's a chance that conservatism will get you excluded from these things, and so you have to be tactful, which is what Jesus is saying in Matthew 10:16, and we need to know what we can do and when we can do it. So that's my response. But should we get to the questions, because we're running low on time? Because Patrick has about 3 or 4.
Sure. Yes. Okay, go ahead. So, if you can go ahead and for now, let's start with the one question, and let's see how much time we have on that.
Okay. So he says,
the first question.
This is from Brother Patrick Chan. If you leave the GOP, this is for Brother James. How would that cash out in practice? I definitely agree there are problems with the GOP, but at the moment there's no other party that can represent conservatives nationally. James?
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, I've never actually been part of the GOP, but we need to stop associating with parties, because parties, in the political aspect, the parties don't necessarily represent our views. Why do I say that? Because they might represent a lot of our views, but they don't represent all of our views. That's the whole reason why we even have denominations in Christianity, because there are different views that we have. So as a Reformed Christian, I have a hard time when they make compromises. Again, this seems to be one of the main words that I continue to use, is there's many compromises by almost all GOP political leaders when it comes to abortion, And some people might say, no way, they're always pro-life. No, they're not. They're pro-life to an extent. They make so many compromises because they might lose money here, things might not happen over here. Oh, let's work it little by little. Are we pro-life, or are we pro-life a little bit? Are we? You know what? I am now an abolitionist, so I take that position that it's everything. Take it off. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter what else we lose. I mean, obviously, in the sense of we're not going to then give up, gay marriage or anything like that. Obviously, in morality's sake, but there's too many compromises going on. We need to battle it as Christians. We're not battling it as a GOP. We're not battling it as libertarians. We're battling it as Christians. This is where we go. Our political leader, believe it or not, is our king. Who is our king? Jesus Christ is our king.
Well, I would take issue with what you said, Brother James, because of the fact that the problem is that we do live in a society that does have a two-party system. You mentioned the Libertarian Party, and for instance, there's a lot of things that I can agree with the Libertarian Party in terms of stepping back and not being involved in. But the problem is that one of the problems that I have is that they're too libertarian on the issue of morals, and morals are not something that I believe you can compromise on. The Ten Commandments stand for everybody, and so when it comes to that issue, like that's why I would I would be I'm under the Republican Party, because I believe that. While obviously I do agree with you that there is compromise, but I don't know anybody who's not compromising. Even in the Democratic Party, there's compromise there. They're not doing everything that they want to do. So in terms of our American system, I actually do see a validity to what Brother Chan spoke about, which is that we have to consider what is the best option. And the problem that we have is that because of political systems, things tend to have a sway. And in our day today, we've been swinging further to the left. But I think that that's due to the fact that we've been passive in what we have allowed. If you notice, they're very actually big on the reaction, and many times even violent reaction. And because of the violent reaction, we tend to step back, and we have to let our voice be heard. And that's one of the things that I do see with an issue with Brother Kevin Sorbo. Like I said, when he was speaking about the issue of the Facebook page, I think he shouldn't have compromised. And I think that someone, especially like him, that has so many followers, he should choose a different platform and encourage people to go to those platforms that actually give us a voice and promote those good principles. Brother Johnny, would you like to say anything before?
Yes, just a really quick. Yeah, he is promoting other platforms. So
yes.
So if you go on his videos and you look at his Twitter, he actually is promoting other platforms. Anyway, I just really quickly, because we have some more questions from Patrick. On the issue of libertarianism is about leave me alone, much like the old liberalism was. But it is in terms of what institution you're talking about, because in today's institutions in modern day liberalism or leftism, whatever we want to call it, their first instinct is problem, go to the state. A single motherhood, go to the state. If it's something else, go to the state. Whereas prior to that, it was, what can I do to solve this problem? If I can't solve it, go to my family. If my family can't solve it, go to the church or faith-based community. And if that doesn't work, then you go to the state as the final. It's the final straw. That's when you have no hope of anything else. But today it has gone in reverse. Now it's basically a worshiping of the state, and that's what libertarianism strives against. And so on that issue, libertarians are 100% with the Christian ideal, which is self, family, church, etc. In terms of the levels of priority. And now, in terms of the political system, I consider myself a disgruntled Republican, a frustrated Republican, because the Republicans, many of them talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. They go to they go to CPAC, they go on their campaign and they'll talk about small government, lower taxes, balancing the budget, eliminating the debt and the deficit and stuff like that. Then they get into office and the deficit continues to grow and grow and grow. And so I can see that, but my problem is that if I decide to take my vote to the to the Libertarian Party, I am guaranteeing the election of a Democrat. So I see the GOP as a vehicle through which good things can be done, but it's basically a very corrupted party. But I don't blame that on the politicians. The voters are the ones that put them there. So that's my answer for that. So it's not all or nothing for me, and so I'm a very frustrated Republican.
We're at the 45-minute mark. Do we close it here, or would you like to extend it for questions and answers?
I do have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Just Go one ahead. Question. Can you vote GOP, especially when you have the administration that we have right now, and not be part of the GOP?
Yeah, you can be independent and vote GOP. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, but
so my point has been is that, and I'm by no means am saying that you guys are like this, because I know you guys, and I know you guys aren't like this, and I know people in my family that are not like this. But people, in a sense, even Christians, are selling out to the GOP, so they themselves are compromising. I'm by no means am saying, hey, like this last election for me was, I cannot let Biden win. So by not letting Biden win, who do I choose? Obviously, you guys know who I'm going to have to vote for. But that doesn't make me a GOP guy. I'm a Christian, and my vote is what is the best means that there are for me to have the Great Commission continue to flourish, for the kingdom to continue to grow. And by the way, the kingdom doesn't decrease, as we've seen before. The kingdom always increases because nobody loses their salvation. What is the best method for me to continue on? Because if we, which unfortunately happened, if we allow these people to take over and we can give them even more and more power, what's going to be, they're going to snuff us out to the point where we're just going to be an underground church, which is probably what's going to happen. And it's going to be very hard to promote Christ as king as an underground church. That doesn't mean it's not possible, and that's exactly how it happened in the first century. But I would like to avoid that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to preserve, the ideals of the union, right? And if we do believe in the republic that we're in, to me, that's what I'm concerned with. In other words, obviously, to be a citizen of heaven is one thing, but to be a citizen of the United States is another. And so our job as Christians is to do what? To pray to God, to call upon the Lord to bring his kingdom on earth, right? But the way that we do that is by each and every one of us having our own work to do that. And so my hope is that with this show, it'll get us to consider this, which is that we have to have a voice. And the question is, how can we best get that voice out there? Because the mainstream media, film, even radio to a degree, does not fully represent us. There tends to be a conservative bent on talk radio, and there are some very good commentators who have some good shows and are pointing this out. But for the most part, most people are watching their TVs and watching, the main news outlets, and getting their information. And so one of the things that we have to figure out is how we can best educate ourselves on these things, and not only to educate ourselves, but to educate others. And I think that one of the ways that I personally would do is that we need to be having conversations within our churches, within the members. The church that we have something called the community group, in which we have discussions. It's not only a Bible study, but we have discussions on these life issues, and sometimes we even talk politics. And I think that this is something that I would think would be of good encouragement to a lot of churches. I think people need to really be speaking on these things, because if we want to have a say, if like Paul, right, who used his right as a Roman citizen, when he was being denied them, as Christians, if we are citizens of this country, we got to put our rights to use. And I think people need to consider the ways in which they can best do that. Would we like to end the show at this time, gentlemen? Or do we have any other statements or concerns?
I think we can do more.
We just have the questions. So
yeah.
Okay. So would you like to extend the time? Shall we extend the time for the questions?
I'm for it.
Okay.
All right. So,
So at this
question
time, if
number
you're,
two. I have the
I was just
second
gonna say
question
it.
ready.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that at this time we've ended the segments of our panel regarding our presentation on Hollywood cancel culture and the interview with Kevin Sorbo, and we're now going to be turning over to Q&A.
Okay. So, second question by Brother Patrick Chan. Another question. Any recommended or favorite conservative films? And I need to hear Johnny's opinion about Zack Snyder, and he's referring to Zack Snyder's Superman movies that he wants me to answer. But go ahead. Eric, go ahead.
Oh yes, okay, yeah. I don't have too much to say because I've got to be honest. I mean, I like what some of the stuff that Zack Snyder's done, but I don't know too much about his work. But I know that I know Johnny, you've mentioned that you've seen some redemptive elements in some of the material that he's put out, and I think you'd probably be better qualified to speak on that issue. But I'm not sure if
No, but
Brother James
but the
might.
first part of the question though had to do with conservative films, and then that the tail end would be Zack Snyder.
Well, okay. Well, I think that that we definitely have a need for that, and I know that Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire are working on putting out films themselves. They have a film. I don't remember the name of the film, but that looks like it's pretty good. And they're now working with I forgot the name of the actress that was in The Mandalorian, and I know that she's going to
Gina
be working
Carano.
on some stuff. Gina Carano. There you go. And so I think that it's good to support these things. But at the same time, one of the concerns that I think a lot of people have is that when you want to watch a film or you want to watch a show, you want it to be good content, right? You want it to be something talented. Now, I don't mean to besmirch, the Christian, movie industry, but it seems to me that sometimes they're not able to do some of the things that Hollywood do. I mean, when's the last time you saw a good Christian sci-fi movie or adventure film? These tend to include, really big budgets, and a lot of the studios, of course, are very capable of doing that. Something like for instance, I personally very much enjoyed Lord of the Rings, but I don't know of any Christian studio who'd be able to, create something of that nature. And so, the only way we can get to that is if people, consciously are supporting this. So it's not only an issue of people creating it, but that people have to look at how to support that. We need to figure out how to support good talent so that we can have something equally of value in the Christian, from a Christian perspective. Brother James, did you have any comment on that?
Well, I would say a good conservative film would be. I was going to joke around and say Independence Day because it seems so patriotic, especially when they're going against the aliens. But it's the conservative films. It just seems that there aren't really any, especially in the last 20 years. And if there are any films that kind of delve into some conservative ideologies, and it's mostly making fun of them. But every once in a while, you'll see something when you go something like Rules of Engagement with Samuel Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones, where it kind of shows you that the war that they were fighting against the Muslims when they took over the embassy and they were shooting and using the shield of these women and children. I mean, that stuff does really happen. And so in a sense, that is a conservative ideology because it just seems like the leftists continually support them no matter how many homosexuals they kill and throw off buildings, no matter how they oppress women, no matter how the sex industry and the slave industry is still being promoted through Islam. So you got to go with some of those films that go against that, right?
Yes, and there are some good films that are put out there. I think Hacksaw Ridge was a good film. If you notice, a lot of the films that tend to have a more conservative bent tend to be more kind of dramas, But it would be nice, I think, to see some Christian work that would go into other areas, It'd be good to, for instance, see a clever Christian comedy. I don't even know if that even exists. I know that Mike Lindell put together a film. I haven't seen it, and that's supposed to attempt that. So I think that's something that maybe we can, look out to see, But definitely we need to see how we can put, like I said, good content together with hopefully good redemptive elements, things that are regarding those things that we hold dear, right? And I know that there is a interest for that because look, they made a Wonder Woman 1984, and that movie is not doing too well. Most people that I know don't like the film, and that is a film that is very preachy on wokeness. So there's definitely, I think, a need for content that can be on the opposite end of that. Any comments, brother Johnny?
Yes. So, in terms of conservative movies, the problem with the conservative movement, and I've voiced this to Brother James and Brother Eric and some other people that I talk to about movies with, because I love watching movies. Movies is just, it's a wonderful experience to just kind of be there and absorb the stories, whether it be a science fiction story like The Avengers or Justice League, or you're watching a movie like As Good as It Gets, which is one of my favorite movies, and some other ones. But specifically when it comes to conservative values, the problem with conservative movies is that most conservative movies and most Christian movies tend to focus more on the message than they do on the story itself. We don't have a Christian conservative version of Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan. We don't have that. And so the moment Christians are able to produce that quality of writing, directing, producing, and all of these stuff, not necessarily have to be a $100 million budget, but just create quality stories that are sprinkled with Christian ideology instead of trying to hit you over the head. And so when I look at movies like, I'm looking at the box office for God's Not Dead. The box office, the worldwide box office for God's Not Dead is 64 million, a little over, it's over $64.5 million, which is actually a success. That's a successful, given the budget. That I don't know what the budget was, but that's a successful movie. It wasn't big budget, but again, when you compare that to movies like, let's say, As Good as It Gets or something like that, budget versus how much money the movie made in the box office. I don't have their information right now. You can see the difference because the stories are about the characters and about the narrative that's being pushed forward. If you look at a movie, one of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is preaching existential values. That's what the screenwriter, and Brian Godawa, the famous Christian writer and screenwriter, actually talked about how he had spoken with the screenwriter of Forrest Gump, and he says that in the story he's preaching existentialism, but people as viewers, they're just watching Tom Hanks, they're watching Sally Field, they're watching Robin Wright, and the amazing story and the great performances and the directing, the visuals are fantastic in this movie. The special effects are excellent. So people want great storytelling, and when Christians create storytelling of that quality, success will follow. But if we're doing these low budget, I think it was let me see, Let There Be Light, which was also a pretty decent movie with a decent message. No Academy Award winning nominations or anything like that, but that movie made a box office worldwide of 7 million, seven and almost a quarter million. Oh, but yeah, $7.25 million, a little more than that. That's not really gonna put you on the map, and so we they need to grow in this sense, and so that's basically my concern. Like they've got the right idea, but they need to execute it with the kind of quality that is required to make good film. So the last part about it had to do with Zack Snyder and the Superman movies. I really enjoyed. Man of Steel was actually a very divisive film. A lot of people hated it. A lot of people loved it. But I actually really enjoyed the movie. I know Brother Eric, not so much. I'm not sure about Brother James. But the thing is that I loved the idea that Zack Snyder was trying to come up with. I didn't like all of the choices. Batman versus Superman, I thought, was a very good movie, but it made some really bad choices with the Martha scene. And there were other choices that I'm not a movie guy. I'm not one of those guys that can produce a movie. I don't know how to do all that. But if I would have been allowed in the room when the script was being said, this is what we're going to do, I'd say, cut this out, cut this out, cut this out, and maybe do this and this and this. So that's what I would have done. But at the same time, in spite of all of the things I didn't like about Batman versus Superman and even Man of Steel, I still found those to be very enjoyable experiences. When it comes to Justice League, the 2017 version was a butchered version of what, excuse me, of what Zack Snyder originally intended. Excuse me, sorry about that. And when he finally released his Snyder cut, it was 4 hours long, and I enjoyed it so much better. I think it is better than Avengers Age of Ultron. I'm not going to put it better than Avengers 1 or Infinity War or Endgame, but I will say that Zack Snyder's 4 hour Justice League is better than Avengers Age of Ultron. That's my answer to those questions.
Okay, well, thank you, brothers. We've reached the 1 hour mark, so I think we're going to go ahead and close it at this time. We want to thank everyone who's watched and is supporting us, and feel free to subscribe to our channel as we plan, by God's grace, to continue to bring hopefully some more good shows and some more good topics. So we thank you for being with us, and may the Lord be with you.
God bless.
God bless.